When somebody lights up and that conflict starts, it means that there's sort of these, like, to me, gold nuggets that are just hidden. We've got to dig for them and try to understand, well, what's going on, what it is that you're needing that you don't actually know how to communicate. We tend to go into explanations of anger, frustration, pissed off at you, annoyed, because those are safer and it allows us to exit emotionally.
You've said that relationships aren't just where we get hurt, but where we heal.
So much of the trauma that I see isn't what happened, but being alone in that.
If someone listening feels kind of discouraged about their relationship right now, what would you want them to hear? Most couples don't struggle because one person is the problem. They struggle because they're stuck in a pattern they don't understand. Today's guest is Kaela Judd, a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of A Rooted Relationship. Kaela works with couples and individuals caught in cycles of conflict, emotional reactivity, and disconnection. The kind where the same arguments keep repeating even when both people care. Her trauma-informed nervous system-based approach focuses less on who's wrong and more on what's happening underneath, how protective patterns form and how they can change when safety is introduced. In this conversation, we explore why conflict isn't a sign something is broken, how relationships can become a place of healing, and what actually helps people move from reactivity to connection. This episode is for anyone who's ever wondered, why does this feel so hard when we both want it to work? Hey, really quick, thanks so much for listening. The purpose of this podcast is to help people understand that they have the ability to choose the direction of their life, whether that be business, finance, relationships, health, any of that. I believe that this podcast will give you the tools to take the right steps. But we need your help. Please be sure to like, to comment, to subscribe. It helps us to bring on more guests and continue to get better. Thank you so much. Kaela, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn more about this. For someone hearing you for the first time, how do you describe the work that you do?
Well, I've had some people describe it as like doing individual therapy with two people at once because there's, there's so much to kind of take into account. Um, but I work with couples who are really trying to connect. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they both want.
Mhm.
And their behaviors really point towards what it is that they're needing. And so we either have people who are like essentially protesting, like, I need you, I want you. And so I'm just working with them to kind of get those needs met.
Mm.
But we have like all of this like trash to work through, or sometimes people describe it as like, bricks in a backpack. So we're having to like unload all of that.
We're weighted down a little
We're
bit
so weighted
trying to go on this
down.
path.
We've got to, I mean, generally, I don't usually see people like it's more of a spectrum of trauma. Like, do you have a lot of trauma or do you have maybe some minimal trauma? I
Mhm.
don't think anybody walks away from childhood without some kind of trauma. And so we're really just working with both partners on their trauma
Okay,
in the context of a relationship.
got it. And how that trauma can have a major impact on the relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you've said that conflict like isn't necessarily a sign something is broken. What do you mean by that?
I get really excited when my couples start to have conflict.
Okay, interesting.
There's a lot of therapists that don't like that. They're like, I don't want to work with couples. I can't do conflict, but it's information.
Mm.
When somebody lights up and that conflict starts, it means that there's sort of these, like, to me, gold nuggets that are just hidden. We've got to dig for them and try to understand, well, what's going on, what it is that you're needing that you don't actually know how to communicate.
Mm.
And a lot of people, I think, really struggle to communicate their needs. There's sort of this process of, if I'm going to communicate my need, that means I need to know what I feel. And if I don't know what I feel, then I can't communicate either one of those.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't know how to feel. They'll talk about how they feel in the terms of the way they think about it. They'll
Mhm.
say things like, I feel like you're not listening. But you can hear in that statement, there's no emotion words. You're not saying, I feel hurt.
Mhm.
I feel sad. I feel scared. So if we don't understand what we feel, we can't express what we need. And so we do it in ways that aren't effective, and it ends up being a lot of conflict.
So does that mean like with some couples there might be just these hidden needs and the partner is just not aware of them, and maybe the person that has those hidden needs maybe isn't really aware of what they are. They just know that
That's
something's off.
that's a perfect way to say it.
Okay.
Because your partner can't know what you need unless you tell them.
Hmm.
And so if you don't know, then everybody's in the dark.
You're like, I'm just upset you're not listening to me, but that's
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's so much depth to what that means too about what they need because a lot of usually there's a partner or sometimes two partners that kind of are just like, well, I don't know how. Like they're just tell me what to do, tell me what you need, right? And they'll kind of sort of make this sort of externalized list
Hmm.
of things that they can do, but they miss the present moment of what that person needs, their partner needs, which is really emotional support and comfort and reassurance.
Okay.
And we just sort of hop over that. That makes sense.
How would somebody figure out what their need is?
You have to learn to feel in your body.
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of times we again talk about our needs in the terms of the way we think rather than what we're actually experiencing in our body. So if you've ever felt like butterflies in your stomach,
Hmm.
that's an emotional sensation. We usually attach that to either nervousness or excitement,
Okay.
right?
They still feel similar. Okay,
Okay.
that makes sense.
So I mean, you could pick out any emotion and just ask yourself, okay, how do I feel that in my body? How do I experience the sensations in my body? A lot of people, when they feel scared, they'll struggle to breathe.
Hmm.
Not actually, but they feel like tightness.
Right.
Or I hear when people talk about shame, a lot of them sort of feel a pit in their stomach
Hmm.
or just like darkness. There's a lot of darkness in that.
Hmm.
So there's ways that your body is actually literally experiencing emotion. And if you're not tapped into that, there's no way for you to know what you're actually feeling. We tend to go into explanations of anger, frustration, pissed off at you, annoyed, because those are safer and it allows us to exit emotionally. It gives us control in a
Okay,
situation. It puts us in a position where we don't have to feel so vulnerable.
got it. So is it more along the lines of like we need to pay attention to how the body feels and use that as an indicator as to if this is a need or not?
Mhm.
Meaning
Yeah.
like, okay, if I get this and it lights me up, then that's good. And maybe I need more of that. But if I get it and it just completely shuts me down or or something or makes me feel anxiety or whatever, then maybe those are types of the things where I'm like, now
Yes
based
and
on
no.
these are indicators.
Yeah. I mean, they're all indicators. It's just gonna give you different information. We tend to villainize the emotion, especially uncomfortable ones, and say, "Oh, I don't wanna feel that. This is bad." But anxiety tells you something. Anxiety is a fancy word for fear.
Okay.
So if I'm feeling anxious, I'm scared of something.
Okay.
So if I'm scared of something, then okay, what do I need here? Do I need support? Do I need um, comfort? So if I, um, sorry,
Yeah.
um, what was your question again? Are these
Uh,
indicators?
yeah, just about those, like if we're paying attention to how the body uh feels, does that kind of give us some indicators to what the needs
Yeah.
are?
Yeah. If I know that I'm, again, feeling scared, then I might know that I need to go to my partner and say, I'm feeling really scared or nervous about this. And then I can express my need. I can express what I need from you. Can you
Hmm.
give me a hug? Can you
Hmm.
hold me? Can you give me some, you know, verbal affirmations or reassurance?
Okay.
So we can then ask what we need.
And maybe if you're not really sure, is it still a good thing to communicate that to your partner, like, hey, I'm feeling this right now, but I'm not really sure why at the
Yeah.
moment. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I'm feeling.
Or even just sometimes if we're learning to feel into our bodies, we might be asking or telling our partner, I don't actually know what I feel right now,
Hmm.
but can you be here with me?
Mm, I love that. And so you mentioned that you're doing some like individual therapy, but then couples. So does that mean like we're working with them individually on their own either needs or trauma or whatever, but then also how they interact with each other or how those types of things interact with each other.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
I
what?
mean, I do individual therapy, but when I work with couples and couples therapy, I'm really tracking the type of conversation they're having.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out, how much awareness do they have? There's like levels of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on those levels, where they fit into that is going to kind of indicate how much that they can show up in the relationship.
Okay.
So we can talk about this later, and I think one of the other questions that you have, but we'll talk about accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. And those are three really critical and key components to
Mm-hmm.
having successful conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm tracking and trying to figure out, okay, one, how much awareness do each of these individuals have, and how are they showing up in these other three indicators? And if they're not, because that's usually the case, then there
Uh-huh.
is more lack of awareness, which is why they're showing up to therapy. Then I'm really talking to both of them and trying to figure out, okay, like when you shared that with them, what happened for you? We're really slowing down the process of the interactions that couples have.
Okay.
Like, let's slow that moment down. There's these micro moments that happen where we can go from having an okay conversation to all of a sudden something's changed. And that's where one or both partners all of a sudden feel some kind of threat between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually like a threat to the relationship.
When you talk about awareness, what do we need to be aware of, or what types of things do we need to pay attention that increase that awareness?
Yeah. There's really like 7 levels of awareness.
Okay.
And we've got 3 red, which is like little awareness. This is where there's a lot of intellectualizing, a lot of like concrete thinking,
Mm-hmm.
rigidity. I can talk about what is happening, but I can't feel it. And then we've got yellow, which is kind of a mixture. And then the green, which is I'm much more aware. I can ask questions. I can be curious. I can understand and be curious about how what I do impacts us.
Okay.
So to go back to your question, what do we need to be aware of? I think that sometimes I think awareness can be hard to build because of trauma. Like trauma really turns off our awareness.
Mm.
And so I think that's where I usually am like, well, if you're struggling to be aware, you only know what you know. Um, there's something called the Johari window that kind of breaks this down into 4 pieces of awareness.
Okay.
Things that I'm just aware of that other people aren't about me. Then there's a part that you're aware about things about me, and I'm aware about those things.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one where it's just things that you know about me that I don't know about me. And then there's the unknown part where you don't know and I don't know. What I typically see is that when we're in that space where only others know this about me, that's where there's a lot of pull and tug because I can't see it. So it's hard for me to understand what you're trying to tell me.
Mm.
When you're telling me that I'm doing something that hurts you, but I can't understand how it hurts you, now I'm lost and now there's conflict. And that's where I feel like sometimes we need a third party to really help us to go through that process of why am I not able to tap in and understand and empathize with this other experience.
So are you saying that sometimes we might have our own trauma, whatever that is that we're dealing with, and that can shut down our awareness of the effects of things on our partner, or
Yeah.
what they're either going through, or how those things either light them up or shut them down. We just can't see it.
Yeah.
It's like it's behind a curtain because we've got
Right.
our own trauma that we're dealing with.
Mm.
Maybe we're triggered or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. You can kind of see how everybody has an emotional experience about everything.
Hmm.
And there's these different components that make that up. We've got the way that a moment would work is that there's usually a danger cue. We then have a physical sensation about that.
Hmm.
There's an emotion that's attached to that. Sometimes there's a surface level one. Usually there's like a deep one. And then there's anger, usually, which is the surface level. It's a secondary emotion. And then from there, we make meaning, we have thoughts, assumptions, and then we behave in such a way.
Okay.
And that's usually a protective behavior. We're trying to protect ourselves in some way. But we usually jump from that danger cue to the behavior. And we don't recognize what happens in between.
Okay.
So when you have a problem with me and I feel like that danger and I go into that protective behavior, that is really the only thing that my partner sees. Like 20% of everything that's happening to me,
Mm,
that's the only thing you're aware of. And
okay.
that's the thing you usually complain about is you behaved this way and it hurt me or I didn't like it or it wasn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
And usually our partner's protective behavior is our danger cue. And that's where a lot of couples end up in this flow of conflict because you just did that protective behavior that hurt me. And now I'm in a danger queue myself. I'm having a trigger.
Can you give an example of that protective behavior that would maybe trigger the other?
Yeah, I mean, you can, I think a easy way to define that is fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Okay.
If we want to look at trauma responses, and there's so many things that can fit into that. I could give you the side eye, and that's a protective
Mm-hmm.
response or reactivity
Okay.
to what you're doing or saying.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Some sort of just some sort of cue there, like
It
I.
is such a spectrum.
Okay.
You could be slamming the cabinet doors. You could look at me funny. You could say something that sounds nice, but be contemptful in your tone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it might not even be real. It's just my perception of.
that's a
of
good point. Sometimes my partner is doing things that is hurtful to the relationship, and that's where awareness needs to be built. But on the other side of things, I might actually be perceiving that.
mm-hmm.
So I give an example sometimes of, your partner could be making you a cup of tea and you could react poorly to that. Does that
Mm,
mean that the person who made the cup of tea did something wrong? No, but they might think that they did because of the reactivity.
okay.
What did I do wrong? Did I make the wrong kind of tea? Did they want hot
Mm-hmm.
chocolate? Did they want coffee? Like, what did I do wrong? Except that response from the partner is very much rooted in probably some kind of trauma.
Okay.
So
So
you
they
can
might
kind
not
of start to
really,
see how it gets confusing
like
fairly
they might not
quickly.
really see the action for what it is. They have this other vision of it in their head of what
Mhm.
happened. And it might not be anything that's
Yeah. Oh, well,
real or true.
you don't care about me.
Oh.
That might be the perception is like you don't care because that wasn't the right way to make it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a personal example.
Okay.
My husband went to go get me a drink, and when he came back, it was wrong. Like it was sort of right, but I was like, they didn't make it right. Like next time, like I was actually feeling a lot of powerlessness that I didn't recognize, and then I became, went into that protective behavior and tried to get him to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
Next time, just don't get it. He's like, I just did this nice thing for you
Mm-hmm.
and you're upset with me. So I went into that protective behavior because part of my danger cue at times is that feeling of powerlessness that I get. And so I will externalize that at times to get him to do something different or get my kids to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel less powerless. I can shut off that emotion that's so uncomfortable.
Right.
Does that make
That
sense?
does. That makes perfect sense. Okay. And then that can cause conflict when maybe he's got a good intention
Yeah.
and he's thinking he's feeling good. He's like, oh, I'm getting some points here for this.
Got
And then I'm like,
thing.
oh, it wasn't the right one,
Yeah. Mhm.
And then that can cause some conflict.
And it
Okay.
did.
Okay. Why do you think, for some couples, why do you think the same arguments can keep coming back? Like, even if they want to change and they want things to be great, but
Mhm.
why do you think they get stuck? Like, just, I see that the same, it's like we're arguing about the same thing over and over
Yeah.
again.
This is part of this is actually super normal. If you read into any of John Gottman's research,
Mhm.
they have found about 69% of couples' conflicts are perpetual.
Okay.
So they just keep coming back, and there's nothing you can do about that generally. They it You have to shift into, managing those conflicts rather than trying to resolve them, because they'll just keep coming back up over and over. And the reason being is because they're very much rooted in things like personality differences,
Mm.
lifestyle choices. You're neat, I'm messy, I'm a spender, you're a saver.
Mhm.
So we might have different political views, different religious views, different ways of parenting,
Okay.
different ways that we, you know, perceive sex, money. So we have to learn to manage those better. Like how it's not about not having conflict, it's about how we have conflict.
Okay.
So I think sometimes for couples, it's really like relieving to hear that of like, oh, okay, we're normal.
Yeah.
We fight about a lot of things, and that's okay. It's just how are we fighting about this? Are we able to fight about this in a way that's productive, where we can feel like a team and a partnership and come out on the other end feeling connected still?
Okay.
If we don't, then we generally end up in what the Gottmans call gridlock, where we try to avoid the topic. We there's a lot of pain involved.
Hmm.
We might end up very polarized in those issues when maybe at the beginning we weren't. So that, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if that's happening, that's partially just normal. And so I really work with couples on when we're in that gridlock, when those conversations aren't going well, we aren't managing it well.
So I guess sometimes we have to just recognize that there's going to be some things like that that we may not completely agree on. We can't just
Mm,
resolve it, and we have to
mhm.
learn to, I don't know,
Yeah,
deal with it or
yeah,
whatever, right? Manage it.
because you're not going to change your partner's, point of view.
Yeah,
I
you're not
mean,
going to make them
maybe,
just suddenly clean.
yeah, maybe at some point they have an experience where that changes for them, but
Okay.
like an experience must happen for that to change. So
Okay.
if it doesn't, then yeah, this is we're learning to manage this, and how are we both showing up in a way that I'm being considerate of you, I'm advocating for you, also considering myself and advocating for myself at the same time. But how are we working together on that?
Okay. I love that. Makes sense. So you kind of focus a little bit less on blame and more on the nervous systems.
Mhm.
Why is that? And it's such an important shift to focus on the nervous system rather than just the blame there.
Well, have you ever been blamed before?
Maybe.
How do you react to that?
I don't enjoy it.
Mm, you probably get defensive,
I don't like
right?
to be shamed at all either. That's probably
Yeah,
the worst thing somebody could do to
yeah.
me is to
Well,
shame me.
shame's even worse than blame.
Yeah.
But generally, we get defensive when we get blamed or
Okay.
shamed,
Hmm.
and that doesn't create connection. So again, when I have a partner who blames, that's information, and I try to figure out, okay, well, what's happening underneath all of that? There's again a need that's being missed that you don't know how to communicate effectively. Let's get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
And I focus you again. So I guess that's the answer, right? Is that we're shifting from looking at it sort of face value of this as blame to there's something happening underneath that you're trying to communicate.
Okay.
You're not aware, your partner's not aware.
Hmm.
So let's get to the bottom of that so that we can then share that. And when I can share my feelings and my needs, generally the partner can hear that and they actually want to be there.
Okay.
There are times that when I share my feelings and my needs, it may light up my partner,
Okay.
which again speaks to generally a lot of trauma.
Got it.
Usually, when you've got a partner who becomes reactive to your feelings or your needs, it's I often see it's because they were given responsibility over parents' emotions when they were children.
Okay.
Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yes.
And so it becomes like a triggering moment of like, I don't want to be responsible for your feelings.
Hmm.
Or I see a lot of them experience this thing of like, I have to abandon myself. Becomes a very black and white situation.
Hmm.
But if you're sharing your feelings and your needs with me, that means I have to abandon myself in order to meet those.
Okay.
Rather than being able to hear them, be there with that person, try to understand it, slow it down, and then decide if you can do that, if you can meet the needs. Like we can always hear the emotions, but if we're used to taking on those emotions to fix them,
Hmm.
because that's how we were raised, that's kind of the role we were given, then it may be really hard to listen to somebody's feelings or their needs.
Okay. So is it sometimes like we have the nervous systems are fighting each other a little bit, maybe not necessarily the people, but the nervous systems are fighting each other
Mhm,
based on trauma.
mhm,
Because the body's trying to protect you
mhm.
based on past trauma
Yeah,
that might not exist now, but it still feels really real and still feels like it
right.
exists. And it's so strong, and that's what's fighting the other person's nervous
Yeah.
system.
There was this art that they did down at, I think it was Burning Man a long time ago, where they have this, statue of an adult next to another adult. They're back to back, and there's
Hmm.
these little children inside trying to hold hands.
Okay.
Do you know what
I don't recognize it, but
can you picture it
I can
though?
picture it.
There's like
Yes.
these two adults back to back, and inside there's these little inner childs.
Okay.
And I think that's just what so many people are dealing with.
Maybe Kara can look at it while we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Kara, look for it for us.
Yeah. Our trauma, yeah, like I think you said that really clearly that I tell my couples, like, you're not having a conversation with your partner right now. Your trauma is having a conversation with their trauma. And that's what takes over. That's what becomes the priority is I've got to self-protect.
Yeah.
So I can't remember what your question was.
I think that's the question was more about just kind of what you said, is it the nervous systems that are kind of fighting each other rather
Mhm.
than the people, rather than the person,
Yeah.
or the conscious
Yeah.
person, I should say.
Yeah, because we're like on either side, I look at in the context of emotionally focused therapy, which is do we pursue or do we withdraw?
Mm-hmm.
With pursuing it, it is this sort of protest of like, where are you? I need you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You can kind of hear sort of the little child in that. And then withdrawing, you tend to have more of the perception of like, whoa, too close, too close. This is too scary. It's too much. Like, I can't handle how close you're trying to get to me because if you get too close, you'll see what's bad about me. You'll see my flaws.
Mm.
Right. And if you get too close, that means you'll go away.
Okay.
So in that, you can kind of hear sort of like that trauma of what, like, that the trauma that we have really solidifies those types of belief
Right.
because the pursuer tends to have more of an anxious attachment, which comes from this place of, having parents who were really emotionally unavailable. And so as an anxious partner, you tend to like need more connection and maybe what is healthy.
And reassurance.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. And for the withdrawing partner, it's more that we grew up with maybe a parent that was bombarding in some way. So it could be on one end of the spectrum where there was a lot of violence, a lot of neglect, or it could be on the other end of this spectrum, which maybe you had a parent who was more of a helicopter parent. They were
Mm-hmm.
really overly involved in your life. We had like experiences where the parent wanted to be best friends with their children,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like too much, too close.
Okay. And that can kind of develop that attachment style
Hmm.
a little bit.
And again,
Okay.
you create that conflict between these two people who really want to connect.
Is this the one right here that you were talking about?
Yeah, this is the one. I love it. I think it's just so
Can you explain
illustrative
it a
of
little bit more again now that we've got it up on the screen there, just for
yeah,
people who are watching? You're
yeah.
listening. Sorry, you won't see this. You're watching.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. We've got these little parts of ourselves, these really wounded parts of ourselves um, from growing up that want to really connect.
Mm-hmm.
But because we've had to really sort of step away from vulnerability, children are so vulnerable, right? They'll
Yeah.
they'll draw you the ugliest picture and come and show it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how you react to that, they'll either decide that they want to keep drawing and keep showing them to you, or it shuts down creativity.
Oh, I love that. So true.
So, as children, we're creative, we're kind, we're loving, we're understanding, so forgiving. And yet, when that vulnerability gets weaponized or shut down or dismissed over and over and over again, this is what you end up with. Are these little kids that you just kind of have to protect that child self that you don't want to get hurt anymore.
Okay.
And so outwardly in these adult bodies, we just become really reactive and
So the inner child kind of wants to connect and be vulnerable and all that, but the
mhm,
adult who's experienced trauma and all of those things becomes kind of fearful.
fearful,
And that,
very fearful. I tend to find that fear is more of the driving factor to this than anything else. Sadness fits in there. And I would say that, generally I think more people have access to feelings of sadness
mhm,
and anger. But when it comes to fear, that's where we like become so reactive because
mhm.
we're afraid of, you know, being too close or we're afraid of being too far apart.
Okay, makes sense. You've said, and I think this was in the little thing that you submitted, but that many behaviors aren't flaws, they're protection.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
I love that sentence. I saw that and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, okay.
We
I want to
we
know
will
more.
describe ourselves through our trauma responses. You probably have heard somebody say like, "Oh, I'm just a perfectionist. Oh, I just have anxiety. Oh, I'm just type A."
Okay.
So they'll describe themselves in those ways, but it may actually be a way that we have learned to protect ourselves. It's a coping mechanism.
Okay.
We talk about coping mechanisms, I think, typically in the terms of, like, addiction or, um, like, generally addiction, I think, but we can look at coping mechanisms as a much broader perspective. People don't just use drugs and alcohol and pornography to
Mhm.
cope with their emotions, but they may go to the gym. They may watch TV, they may scroll on their phone, they may eat.
Mhm.
And it doesn't really matter what it is, which can be confusing for some people because if I'm going to the gym and working out, that's seen as like a healthy behavior. But if you're going to the gym for 4 hours a day,
Mm.
I mean, maybe that's your job. No judgment on that.
Mhm.
But if we're using that to escape because it's just like we just had a fight and it's just like, I'm going to the gym. And I'm using that as an avoidant tactic. You can see how that's now a coping mechanism to not having to emotionally feel anything. If I run away from you and go to the gym and I am focused on something else, I'm distracted, I'm not feeling in my body and I'm not connecting with you.
Okay. What do you think about, like, you said that, I mean, some of those things are, we believe who we are just because of that trauma. Where you're like, oh, I just have anxiety or I have whatever.
Mhm.
What do you think about those labels? Like, if people label themselves that way?
I think it's a distraction. I think there's a part of us that is looking to define who we are, to know who we are. And yet if we didn't really get the opportunity to develop those parts of ourselves, I find that people seek out labels
Okay.
to understand themselves, to get to know themselves.
Hmm.
Except it's um trying to think of the word. It's like a false place to do that
Okay.
because you can really get to know yourself through your emotions.
Hmm.
Because if I know that, you know, I don't like the way that you're treating me, again, now I know what I need and this isn't where I'm going. Or if I find joy in painting, and I experience that emotion, then I know that about myself.
Okay.
So maybe I can label myself that way. I'm a painter. But I find it really interesting when we kind of label our like these characteristics
Right.
like perfectionism or, you know, I'm trying to think of like other ones that I use typically. Just to maybe I'm avoidant or I don't, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. Even some of those things might it doesn't
Yeah.
always mean that those are trauma responses,
Yeah.
but I always think it's interesting to look at them and say, okay, is it causing issues with like your daily functioning? Is it causing
Mm.
issues in your relationship?
Yeah.
How is that impacting things in your life?
I definitely have an issue with some labels because I believe like the unconscious mind will believe what you tell it over time if you
Hmm.
tell it enough.
Oh yeah.
And so if you're like, I'm an anxious person, this is probably one of the issues I have for people who go, what's the one, Alcoholics Anonymous, where
Hmm.
they go through and they're like, I'm an alcoholic, and that's just what
Hmm.
they say forever. And
Yeah.
I just have the biggest problem with that because it's like, it's drinking alcohol is something you do, it's not who you are.
Yeah.
And I have such a problem with label. But I think,
Hmm.
there's other the labels that might be positive and uplifting for you. I mean, maybe those are
Yeah.
okay, but the other ones I really struggle with because it just seems like it programs the mind to believe that this is who I am. I'm an
Yeah.
alcoholic, no matter what I
I
do, no matter
I
how many
think
things I
you
go to.
I think you make a really great point. When we attach ourselves to those things, um, I think it can cause shame,
Hmm.
which I think is just adds sort of another layer to the problem. When I've got clients who have a lot of shame, we actually have to work on the shame before we work on anything else,
Mm,
because that shame is usually sticking to other emotions. So
hmm.
let's take that away so we can actually understand the emotion that you're feeling. Um, but sorry, I'm not
You're
going
good.
over here. What
No,
was the
no. So
question again?
speaking of this is kind of interesting to me. But do you think trauma can get mistaken for personality and or character issues?
Yes. I think you have to look at that very nuanced.
Okay.
I think for some people, diagnosis can be helpful if they have, I think, enough awareness to say, okay, like what am I going to do about this?
Hmm.
And for some people, they're like, oh, this is just who I am.
Mhm.
And that again points to like when we look at sort of those phases of awareness and the red, that's one of the things that you hear people say. It's just like, well, this is just who I am.
Mhm.
Are you going to accept me or not?
Mhm.
So it can either be detrimental or not. I tend to not diagnose people because I think it pigeonholes what they feel like they can do. I had a client who had been formally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder,
Okay.
and they were told that they would never be able to be empathetic. And I was seeing them in a couple,
Mhm.
and I remember walking them through some steps, and they were sharing and talking to their partner, and all of a sudden there was all this empathy, and I'm like, do you see that that was empathetic?
Mhm.
What you just did was empathetic." And it was a really big deal for them because somebody had just said, "Oh, you have this problem and you'll never be empathetic."
And so they just believed it, and then that's the label that they have, and
Yeah,
I'm just not empathetic, sorry.
yeah,
When really they deep down, they probably are, but there was some
yeah,
trauma-based response to it that
yeah.
prevented it.
Again, it's that awareness, and it's like if I'm aware, that means I'm vulnerable. If I'm vulnerable, I can get hurt. So we start to shut off the emotions and we shut off the empathy.
Mm.
We can't. The way that we empathize with people is by feeling with them. If I'm not able if you're feeling sad and I can't tap into my own, like, sensations of sadness,
Mhm.
there's no way for me to be empathetic towards you.
Okay.
I might intellectualize that, but I can't actually be there with you.
Okay. That's great. Um, you've said that relationships aren't just where we get hurt, but where we heal.
Mm.
Can you tell me a little more about that, or why do you believe that's true?
I
That word?
love this. This is my favorite part of my job because when we get hurt in relationships, part of that hurt is that there is a lack of repair and a whole lot of loneliness. When I have a parent that hurts me, or if I have an experience where I feel hurt or scared or whatever it is,
Mhm.
it's parents' role to one, repair with their child if a repair is needed. It is a parent's job, not a child's job. 0%.
Okay.
I'll die
Love
on
that.
that hill.
Good. I love that one.
And whether a parent has hurt the child or not, maybe it's something that happened at school, it's also a parent's role to be attuned to their child and their needs. And so much of the trauma that I see isn't what happened, but being alone in that. So if I got hurt at school and Billy called me, a butthead,
Mhm.
and I feel so sad and hurt about that, and I have a parent that doesn't pay attention, they don't ask what's wrong. Not only did I deal with what happened, but now I'm alone feeling all of this stuff
Mm.
and I'm feeling all the emotions. And part of a parent's role is to come in and help build emotional resilience in that moment. Like, we can't change the circumstances, but we can
Right.
say, oh, yeah, that hurts really bad,
Yeah.
and it makes sense that it hurts.
Yeah.
But now I've built resilience. I think a better example is disappointment. Our children need to learn to feel disappointed.
Mhm.
And I remember one time my child wanted me to come to one of us to come to an assembly he was performing in, and neither one of us could make it.
Mm.
And he was so disappointed, and so we talked about it. I didn't just say, "Hey, just get over it." I said, "It makes sense that it's disappointing. What is that like for you?" And he felt disappointed, and we moved through it together. He wasn't alone in it, and we moved on.
Yeah.
So that aloneness is just so key to what I think a lot of people feel when they don't have somebody with them. So when we're talking about healing and relationship, part of what we can do for our partners is by creating a space where they are feeling something and I'm with you. And that is sometimes all that's needed. Again, we sort of externalize, tell me what you need. You need me
Me,
to
I
do
don't
the
I don't I
dishes.
don't
You need
necessarily
me
need to
to.
say anything. Sometimes I just need to hold some space and just be there,
Yeah.
be present.
I don't know, this might be that place that I wanted to talk more about the
Okay.
accessibility, the responsiveness, and
Please, yeah.
engagement. These are super key to how we actually show up. Some people are like, "Oh, I want to, but I don't know how." Well, this is how. Are you accessible? Is your phone off? Is the TV off? Are you looking at your partner? Are you not just physically checked in, but are you emotionally checked in? Are you in a place where you can hear this? And then responsiveness, I kind of categorize, and maybe not everybody would agree with me on this, but I categorize it as like questions. This is where we're responding to that person with the curiosity.
Hmm.
Help me understand this more. Even if it's about me, you feel like I hurt you. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
Help me understand what you're
Be
feeling.
curious.
Help me understand how you're experiencing this. That gives me more information. Sometimes that gives enough information where I don't actually feel threatened by what you're sharing with me.
Mm.
But then outside of that, into this engagement piece is that we're, mm, you know, I would say that it's more like statements. Like, "Oh, that sounds really tough. That sounds like a really hard situation." I I think it's really important to say things like, how does or that makes sense, but how does it make sense? I'll ask partners sometimes, they'll say to their partner, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense that you feel that way." And I'm like, "Well, how? How does it make sense to you?"
Mhm.
And so when they get into the explanation of, "Oh, well, I guess I've been in a situation like that, and if I was feeling, really helpless, I would just feel like I'm in a deep, dark hole all alone."
Yeah.
And that is when something happens. There's this moment where the partner that is in distress just sort of relaxes because now they're not alone in it. Somebody understands what I'm feeling. Not only is it safe to share with you what I'm feeling, you get it.
Okay.
And now you're here with me. That's the moment that something really shifts. And when we have those experiences over and over and over again, we start to create these consistent corrective experiences from
Mm.
experiences that I had growing up.
And that's where the healing can
Yeah,
happen in
I
the
learned
relationship.
I
It's
learned
repeated.
I learned to trust, I learned to feel safe. I learned that when something comes up, it's not, "Ah, should I bring that up?" It's, "When I'm getting home, I'm gonna talk to my partner about this." Because they're gonna get it, they're gonna understand, they're gonna have space for it. What I asterisk on this one too that I just recently realized is really important is the repair in that engagement. Sometimes part of my repair might be, yeah, it makes sense that you're scared of the fact that I got home late
Mhm.
because in the past, when I got home late, I was out partying or I was out with somebody. So it makes sense that, you're feeling this way and I'm really
Or
sorry.
maybe they experienced that from a past relationship when
Or
somebody
a
got
past
home late
relationship. Yeah.
and that their nervous system still feels that.
Yeah. I would say that that's a little different than this repair that I'm talking
Okay.
about. The
Okay.
repair is, whether I need to apologize or I need to own something here because I can recognize that there was something that happened for you and it makes sense because there's been a pattern of this.
Okay.
So I think that that can fit into that engagement piece. So you can think of R.A.R.E.
Okay. So it sounds like couples need to kind of practice this, right? Like it might
Mhm.
be a little challenging at first. It might be a little uncomfortable at first, but the more that we do it with talking through those little
Mhm.
things, the more that it heals each other's nervous system
Yeah.
and then it makes it okay. And then they feel safe. And then when conflict arises, we don't go back to the childhood trauma. We can
Mhm.
stay a little more present and maybe work on just that smaller part that exists.
Yeah. I love that piece of connection that when we're working together, when we're showing up in this way that I want to be here for you, but I also want to help you heal.
Hmm.
When we have that perspective, I think we can have a lot more patience and understanding. We can look at it from the perspective of you're not reacting to me. You're reacting to something that you've experienced before.
Mm.
And I'm just reminding you of that.
So in that moment, like when there is conflict, how can a partner keep calm in a situation, rather than making it more intense if they're dealing with their own
Mhm.
maybe their own trauma, right? And sometimes we just tend to like, hey, let's just escalate it a little bit.
Yeah.
What advice could you give to them to like, here's how you can kind of remain a little more calm for that and be a little more observant and aware of what's going on. So,
I'm almost like, oh, am I giving the suggestions like when we have really intense maybe mental health struggles, this
mhm,
is a little bit different. So I'm like, okay, how do I answer that question 2 ways? I think the initial answer is that when you have a partner who's in distress, you have to be aware of it. You have to be aware. That's key. It's absolutely key. If you can't be aware, you probably need some support to help create the awareness. Because if you have a partner that's in distress, that's when we hit the stop button. That's when I say you've only got two options at that point when somebody's in distress. We either give space, take a break so that you or I or both of us can self regulate our emotions,
Okay.
or we can lean into what's called co regulation,
Mm.
where we're no longer talking about the issue. And that's what people miss is that we'll start off talking about, how we want to discipline the kids. And all of a sudden something changes. There's this micro moment of like, okay, now I feel threatened. And that shifts from we're talking about the issue to now we're talking about the emotional experience you're having underneath all of that.
Okay.
You're feeling scared, you're feeling helpless, powerless, insecure, inadequate. Something's just lit up. And now we have to have a conversation about that. We have to take this parenting issue and just say, okay, we're not, that's on the shelf for right now. Let's talk about what's happening for you.
Okay.
That's tricky because it sometimes can put partners into the position or a role of a therapist. And I think you have to be really careful about that
Mm.
because it's not your partner's job to be your therapist, especially when maybe your partner was the one that brought up the issue and they're talking about the complaint. And now things have turned around and now we're talking about your feelings. That I think is really, really common in some of these really high conflict situations
Okay.
is that now I have to abandon myself and my complaint and everything that I wanted to talk to you about because now you're having a problem. So it's a little bit tricky. If if you feel like you are not in distress and you can be there for them and you can give them the accessibility, the responsiveness and engagement, that's again a beautiful place to create some healing and connection.
Hmm.
If you don't feel like you have the space, that's where we need to either self-regulate or seek out
Okay.
a third party.
Seems like if we're in distress, it's just hard to work anything out.
Yeah.
Because you're just coming out of so much
Yeah.
emotion, intensity, right? You just
When
can't hear each other.
some couples just get so confused because they're like, who's right and who's wrong?
Mm.
And that's a pretty good indication that one or both of us is in a lot of distress. When I use that word distress, like we really can talk about that in terms of trauma responses. You're in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And when you're there, you don't have access to your whole brain. Your prefrontal cortex shuts down completely.
Hmm.
And so that's when your amygdala, your emotions take over. And this is where we're not really thinking, even though you might think that you're thinking.
Okay.
You might think that you're being logical. That's where we might just be intellectualizing things.
Hmm.
The Gottmans will, they've done research on this that when your heart hits 95 beats per minute, you're flooded or you're in distress.
Mm.
So sometimes I had a couple I did this with once and it started going off and he's like, I'm fine. I'm like, no, you're not, you're flooded.
Hmm.
And so sometimes we don't actually recognize when something's changed for us and now we're in distress. Or maybe we don't notice our partner. Sometimes we can't. We usually can notice when our partner's in distress before we can notice that we're in distress.
So if the heart rate's up like that above the 95, that's an indicator like, hey, we need to either take a step back or we
Mm.
need to figure out how to,
Yeah.
you called it self-regulate.
Self-regulate. So we need to get our mind off the fight or we keep thinking. If we keep thinking about it, our brain keeps thinking that we're there, even if we're not.
Okay.
We've got to separate, go somewhere different, distract ourselves, which isn't usually what a therapist will tell you to do, but we're going to distract ourselves so we can calm down.
Hmm.
If we can then re-engage in the conversation, you're good to go.
Okay.
I find that a lot of my high conflict couples can't do that. They can't take a break and then come back.
Mm.
So that's
Go right
why
back to the conflict or
they go right back in. So that's where I have to slow things down and really help them not just learn to co-regulate and what does that mean, but how do we actually start to process what's happening for you so that we can do that. So co-regulation, if we were going to define that, I really like to use physical touch. Sometimes the only thing we might have in us is to like just put our hand out and hope that our partner grabs it.
Okay.
But we might just hold hands for a few minutes without talking because it sends signals to the brain that there's something safe about this, right?
Mm,
Like you don't hold hands with your enemy. You don't hold hands with the person who's got the gun pointed at you.
right.
So
So
whether
it might be a
holding,
calming.
that's
Okay.
the regulation, the co-regulation is together. You know, uh, mothers co-regulate with their newborns, like their temperature.
Hmm.
Babies can't regulate their own temperature. And when they get as they get old, it's the same thing with their emotions. A parent co-regulates with their child. So as adults, we can do this as well, that I can be here with you as you're in this distress and we can figure out what's happening for you
Okay.
and regulate that so that we can get back into this. And there can be a lot of connection in that. And then that allows us to maybe continue the conversation.
I never thought about that, but it does seem like if there's just a couple of minutes of silence and hand holding, just kind of more peace can take over, more calmness there,
Mhm.
more awareness, more realization like, oh, maybe I need to tackle this a different way instead of just like,
Mhm.
ah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just
'Cause
fight about it and I can hear and I can listen.
yeah, otherwise you're just up in your head trying to figure out how am I gonna defend myself?
Mm,
How am I gonna point out your flaw in the way that you think about this?
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of defensiveness. And we just wanna hit that stop button. If you wanna protect your relationship, we've gotta hit that stop button. That's where we start to say things we don't mean.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if in that moment they people will think I don't want to protect this relationship, but it's just so upset.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I don't that's not
Yeah.
usually what people are cognitively thinking,
Okay.
but that's the emotional piece, is that I've experienced this kind of disconnection before.
Okay.
So if I can, there's very much a common theme that if I can convince you to think differently, then we'll be okay.
Mm,
They don't, people don't think that will be okay, but I just need to change your point of view.
mm,
And but that's the outcome, is that then I'm safe because we can be close.
mm-hmm.
If you think the way that I think, we can be close.
Okay.
And if we don't, then there's something about the disagreement. There's something about um like being on different pages that just get really scary for people.
Okay. Interesting. So if someone listening feels kind of discouraged about their relationship right now, what would you want them to hear?
That it's not doom and gloom all the time. People often feel that way, that, well, if we can't talk, like, what's the point? If we can't connect, what's the point? Some people have actually really good relationships that we kind of end up throwing in the trash because we just don't have the right tools or skills,
Mm,
or we haven't had enough healing in our own experiences, or our partner hasn't.
mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of hope. Um, a lot of hope. I've seen a lot of people in really, really tough places, and they've been able to make it out of there. Walking out of my office hand in hand,
Wow.
and it's just a matter of like getting that healing, getting the tools and the skills that you need to be able to do that.
Hmm.
So
That makes sense. I like it. What's one way that someone could see conflict differently this week and may change how they show up in it?
I think if you can slow down enough to recognize that, when your partner or even if your children or somebody at work is upset, anger is a secondary emotion, meaning that it comes second to anything else that we feel.
Okay.
So if we see that anger, if we see that frustration, and if we can shift into this idea of, okay, something is needed here, they're just doing it really poorly,
Okay.
and asking that question, like, what it is, what do you need right now?
Can
That
you
might actually be able to shift, quite a bit.
can you explain really quick for this for those that don't know the difference between a primary and a secondary emotion?
Yeah. So primary emotions are, in the easiest way to say it, sadness and fear. One of those emotions come up ever before you feel anger.
Okay.
Angry emotions are like megaphones for our other emotions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not paying attention to them, if you're not attending to them, then your anger will come out. Your
Okay.
needs aren't getting met. I find that when we don't have boundaries, annoyance is sort of the emotion that comes up. not like anger and rage. It's like, I am so annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can, even the anger we can listen to get down to, those deeper emotions. If your boundaries are getting crossed, there's probably some hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There's sadness in that disappointment.
Yeah.
So if we can ask that question of ourselves or even just pay attention to that for our partners, then we might get a little more curious about, okay, what's really happening?
Mm-hmm.
What's really going on? And when we can slow down and ask that question, I mean, I bet like nine times out of 10, your partner's going to start crying
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, just had this terrible day.
Mm-hmm.
I need to check out. I need some help. You know, I just feel bad. I need reassurance. It's
Yeah.
always that need. You're always, as a partner, you should always be seeking what that need is.
It's interesting because I didn't think about anger always being a secondary emotion. It makes sense because there's something that comes first always,
Mhm.
and then kind of creates that.
Yeah. My professor will die on that hill.
Really?
So I will too.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Um, I want to switch gears just a little bit here,
Mhm.
but you recently started a podcast as
I
well,
did.
right? Okay, I want to hear about this.
Just last month,
Uh,
a colleague of mine and I were like best friends. It's something that we both wanted to do. And so we started recording last year. We both have ADHD. So we're like, we'll start recording and then we'll launch later.
mhm.
So we launched it in January. So we talk a lot about relationships, a lot about trauma,
Can you pull it up, Kara?
and just kind of, she does a lot of, her name's Ashley Wright. She does a lot of somatic therapy, a lot of sexual trauma work. And
Okay.
and we talk a lot about that. And then I just take this other approach of talking about the relationship aspect of that. And we're just covering all sorts of topics, whatever comes up, whatever we want to
Okay,
discuss. So
that is awesome, and it
yeah,
was called
no couch
No Couch
required
Required. Okay,
podcast.
that's what it was. I really like that name. Like it made
That was
made sense with
Ashley.
what it was. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so you just launched that, and I think when I looked, I think you got like 7 episodes or something like that out, somewhere around there.
Yeah, something. I think we might be at 5.
At 5, okay.
I think it's been not quite a month.
Yeah,
So
that is so fun. Where can people go to learn more about your work? Okay, before we move on,
no,
here it
you
is.
know,
So
that's
on
the
on
YouTube.
YouTube, it's at No Couch Required Pod.
Yeah. Or you can find us on Instagram, find us on all the podcasting sites.
Okay,
So,
yeah, very cool. Um, so I guess that answered that next question, where people can go to find you and where they can find more about your podcast and educational content. Thanks so much. That was
yeah.
that was amazing. There was so much good takeaways from that, and I think the biggest thing for me was just understanding that sometimes when we're in conflict, it's not really us; it's the nervous system that's kind of in conflict with the other,
Yeah.
and just that kind of gives a little bit of reassurance, like, hey, sometimes problems in relationships, like it can be resolved
Mhm.
if that inner nervous system can be healed, because it's
Yeah.
not, it may feel like it's just this is the biggest fight ever, but it's
Mhm.
really, it might be something smaller, but internally it just feels bigger because we've got
Yeah.
that nervous system like battle. It's like,
Yeah. It is strong. It will do whatever it takes to keep you safe.
yeah.
So if we stop looking at our partner as the villain, as the enemy, and we start looking at sort of the cycle
Hmm.
and what happens to us as more of the villain, puts us in a
I like that.
position to really work together
Hmm.
on like, oh, here it is. We're in that cycle again that we get in. Can we
Yeah.
stop? Can we
Yeah.
try again?
Hmm.
So that can shift things too.
Yeah.
There's some of these little things are really easy to do, but I think sometimes what we have to recognize is that a lot of talk therapy doesn't always work because a lot of couples therapy looks at using skills, teaching skills and tools.
Hmm.
Emotionally focused therapy and trauma informed therapy really looks at let's calm the nervous system
Hmm.
because you lose access to all the skills, everything that they teach you when that kicks up. Because again, that part of your brain shuts down, so you don't have access to any of the things that you're learning.
That makes so much sense. So
Yeah.
I'm really big on like self-development, and I've spent well over 6 figures on that just because I love
Mm.
I love learning. But I've noticed that for me personally, if I'm in that state, it's like I can have all the tools that I've, learned, and that
Yeah.
it's like none of it's available.
None of it works.
It's not there, and I'll beat myself up later on. Like, I know this stuff, and I know how to do this, and I know that, and I understand this, and why was it like just not there?
Yeah, and you go from knowing all that stuff to red, because now we're in survival. Now we're trying to survive. So you can look at it like if you're drowning, all of a sudden you're drowning, everything becomes collateral damage. You'll do whatever it takes to not drown, even if you drown another person. So
Great analogy.
you can have a lifesaver floating there, but if you're not aware of it, or we just
Your
have
mind
to,
might not see it because you're just trying not. You're drowning.
you're drowning. You'll do whatever it takes. So yeah, we lose complete access to all of those things. So I will teach skills after we build emotional safety. When there's emotional safety, when we don't feel so threatened, when we can engage in a different way, we can use all those skills. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
But that's where I went from wanting to be a Gottman certified therapist to an EFT therapist, because Gottman stuff is really, really great. They've got a lot of tools, a lot of skill-based stuff that's really critical. It helps you understand things more cognitively, intellectualize it. But when there's no safety, nothing else matters.
So we have to kind of focus on that feeling maybe of being feeling safe and on the emotional side, and then we have access to the other tools.
Safety keeps me calm.
Okay.
Safety doesn't light up my nervous system.
Wow, I like that. That's huge. So, anyways, if you guys enjoyed that, please be sure to like and comment. And I'm still wrapping my head around that because I thought that was just
there's so much more we could
amazing.
talk about.
That was so.
That was like skimming the surface.
No, that was so amazing. But I appreciate you so much for coming on, and just you've shared so much there, and there's so many takeaways from this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.